As he stood in the dimly lit courtroom, surrounded by cold stares and the weight of his past mistakes, his final request silenced everyone. He just wanted to see his dog one last time. What happened next would change not only his life, but everyone who witnessed it forever. The air was heavy with tension, the kind that made every shuffle of paper and muffled cough echo in the vast space. For years, Jack Reynolds had been at the center of a whirlwind of scandal and betrayal, accused of crimes he had long denied. Once a respected figure in his small hometown, he now found himself stripped of dignity, reduced to a shadow of the man he used to be. His only companion through those years of turmoil was Titan, his loyal Labrador retriever, a constant source of comfort amidst the storm. The courtroom was an arena of judgment, filled with faces eager to see Jack's fate sealed. Reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every moment of the trial that had captivated the nation. But as Jack stood there, his voice steady despite the quiver in his hands, his request was unlike anything anyone expected. "Your Honor," he began, his eyes fixed on the judge, "before this sentence is carried out, I have but one wish. I would like to see Titan, my dog, one last time." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, disbelief mingling with curiosity. Even the judge, a stoic figure who rarely betrayed emotion, leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "A dog?" he questioned, his voice laced with skepticism. "Yes," Jack affirmed, his gaze unwavering. "Titan has been with me through everything. He deserves a proper goodbye." The room fell silent, and for a moment, the humanity in Jack's plea overshadowed the harshness of the charges against him. It wasn't about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about a man's final connection to the one being who had never judged him. Unbeknownst to everyone present, Jack's request would unravel a series of events that no one could have anticipated. Titan was no ordinary dog, and their reunion would bring to light truths that had been buried for years, reshaping the narrative of Jack's life and those around him forever. Jack Reynolds hadn't always been a man accused of crimes. Just 5 years ago, he was the pride of Meadowbrook, a small picturesque town nestled at the foot of the Rockies. As the founder of a local non-profit that rescued abandoned animals, Jack was a beloved figure, often seen walking Titan through the town square or organizing adoption events at the community center. His life seemed idyllic, almost too good to be true. But behind the scenes, things began to unravel. A trusted colleague had accused him of embezzling funds meant for the non-profit, alleging that Jack had siphoned thousands of dollars into offshore accounts. The evidence was damning: forged signatures, falsified invoices, and financial trails that pointed directly to him. Overnight, Jack went from hero to pariah, shunned by the very community he had served. Through it all, Titan remained his steadfast companion. The Labrador had been a rescue himself, found as a trembling pup on the side of a highway years before. Jack had nursed him back to health, and their bond was unbreakable. When friends and neighbors turned their backs on Jack, Titan stayed by his side, offering silent comfort during sleepless nights filled with worry and regret. The trial had been swift and merciless. Prosecutors painted Jack as a greedy opportunist, someone who had betrayed the trust of his community for personal gain. Despite Jack's pleas of innocence, his defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Witnesses testified against him. Financial experts confirmed the damning paper trail, and even his closest allies distanced themselves. The judge handed down a guilty verdict, sentencing Jack to life in prison. The courtroom was now his final stage, a place where every aspect of his life had been dissected and judged. As he stood there making his unusual request, the room seemed divided. Some dismissed it as a ploy for sympathy, while others couldn't help but feel a pang of compassion for the man who had lost everything. The judge's response was cautious. "This is a highly irregular request, Mr. Reynolds," he said, removing his glasses and placing them on the bench. "However, given the circumstances and the gravity of the sentence, I will allow it. Your dog will be brought here under strict supervision." Jack's shoulders sagged in relief. It was a small victory, but it meant everything to him. The arrangements were made, and the following day, Titan was brought to the courthouse. The sight of the dog, tail wagging furiously as he entered the room, brought a collective gasp from the audience. For a moment, the hardened expressions of guards and spectators softened as they watched the loyal Labrador tug against his leash, desperate to reach his owner. Jack knelt down, his hands trembling as they met Titan's fur. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "Hey, buddy. I missed you so much." Titan barked softly, his tail wagging even faster as he licked Jack's face. The connection between the two was palpable, a rare moment of pure, unfiltered emotion that cut through the tension in the room. But then, something unexpected happened. As Titan moved closer, he began sniffing Jack intently, his nose pressing against the fabric of Jack's shirt. The dog's demeanor shifted, his movements deliberate and focused. Jack noticed the subtle change and frowned. "What's wrong, Titan?" The dog turned to the judge's bench and barked sharply, startling everyone in the room. Titan's handler struggled to regain control, but the Labrador wouldn't budge. He barked again, his eyes locked on the judge's desk. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder, confusion spreading like wildfire. "Is there a problem with the dog?" the judge asked, his voice tinged with irritation. "I'm not sure," the handler replied, pulling at Titan's leash. But the dog refused to move, his barking growing more insistent. It was then that Jack's gaze fell on a small flash of light reflecting off Titan's collar. At first, it seemed like an ordinary tag, but upon closer inspection, Jack realized it wasn't. Hidden among the folds of Titan's collar was a tiny metallic object, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Jack's heart raced as he reached out, his fingers brushing against the object. It was a USB drive, cleverly concealed within the collar's lining. Jack quickly pocketed the device, his mind racing with questions. Who had placed it there? Why was it hidden on Titan? And most importantly, what secrets did it contain? The dog's sudden change in behavior made sense now. Titan wasn't just happy to see him. He had been trying to deliver something important. Unbeknownst to everyone in the room, this small device held the potential to change everything. It wasn't just a symbol of hope for Jack. It was a lifeline, a chance to prove his innocence and uncover the truth about the betrayal that had destroyed his life. As the courtroom settled back into uneasy silence, Jack's mind was anything but quiet. For the first time in years, a spark of hope ignited within him. Titan, his loyal companion, had just given him a reason to fight back. Back in the holding cell, Jack sat alone, his hands trembling as he examined the USB drive he had retrieved from Titan's collar. He turned it over in his fingers, the tiny device feeling heavier than it should. It was impossible to tell what it contained, but Jack couldn't ignore the meticulous planning it must have taken to hide it. Someone had gone to great lengths to ensure he received it, and Titan had been the courier. Jack's thoughts spiraled. Could this drive be connected to his case? Was it evidence planted to frame him further, or was it a lifeline, holding the key to his exoneration? He couldn't afford to hope blindly, but the sheer presence of the device filled him with a mix of dread and cautious optimism. "Reynolds, you've got a visitor," a guard barked, interrupting his thoughts. Jack looked up, surprised. Visitors had become rare after his conviction. The guard opened the cell door and led him to a private room where his attorney, Claire Monroe, was waiting. Claire was a fiery young lawyer who had taken Jack's case pro bono, determined to prove his innocence despite the mountain of evidence against him. "Claire," Jack greeted her with a weak smile. "I didn't expect to see you today. I got word about your unusual request in court," Claire said, raising an eyebrow. "And I heard about Titan. What's going on?" Jack hesitated, unsure of how much he could safely reveal. Finally, he leaned in, lowering his voice. "I found this," he said, pulling the USB drive from his pocket and sliding it across the table. Claire's eyes widened as she picked up the device. "Where did this come from?" "It was hidden in Titan's collar," Jack explained. "I don't know who put it there or why, but something tells me it's important." Claire studied the drive, her mind already racing. "If this has anything to do with your case, we need to figure out what's on it. But we'll need to be careful. If it's evidence, then we have to handle it by the book, or it could be dismissed in court." "Can you check it?" Jack asked, his voice laced with urgency. "I'll see what I can do," Claire replied, "but accessing it might not be easy. If whoever planted this went to the trouble of hiding it, they likely encrypted it as well." Jack nodded. "Whatever it takes, I need to know the truth." Later that evening, Claire returned to her office, her mind buzzing with questions. She connected the USB drive to her secure laptop, half expecting it to contain nothing of value. Instead, the screen filled with files, all labeled with cryptic names. Her breath caught as she opened the first document. It wasn't just financial data. It was a detailed log of transactions, timestamps, and correspondence between high-ranking members of the non-profits board. The files painted a damning picture, but not of Jack. They showed a coordinated effort by several board members to embezzle funds and shift the blame onto Jack when an audit threatened to expose their activities. Email threads revealed cold calculations, discussing how to fabricate evidence against Jack and ensure his conviction. Claire's heart pounded as she scrolled through the files. This wasn't just exonerating evidence, it was a full-blown conspiracy. But the most shocking revelation came in the form of a video file labeled, "For Jack." With trembling hands, Claire clicked on it. The video began with a dimly lit room. A man appeared on the screen, his face obscured by shadows. "Jack," the voice began, distorted to disguise the speaker's identity. "If you're seeing this, it means Titan delivered the drive as planned. You were framed by people you trusted, and this evidence will prove it. But be warned, they're watching. You'll need to act carefully and quickly to expose the truth." Claire froze, the weight of the situation sinking in. Whoever had created this video clearly had inside knowledge of the conspiracy, but why hadn't they come forward themselves? Why had they chosen to place the burden of revealing the truth on Jack? Determined, Claire began downloading and encrypting the files, taking every precaution to protect the evidence. She couldn't risk the data being traced or tampered with. The next day, Jack sat in his cell, anxiously awaiting news. When Claire finally arrived, her expression was a mix of triumph and urgency. "You were right," she said, placing a folder on the table between them. "This drive contains everything we need to prove your innocence. Emails, financial records, even video evidence." Jack's breath hitched. "Are you serious? This could clear my name." "Yes," Claire confirmed, "but it's not just about clearing your name. This is bigger than you. The people who framed you are powerful, and they won't let this information come to light without a fight." "What do we do?" Jack asked, the spark of hope in his eyes tempered by the gravity of her words. Claire leaned in, her voice low. "We need to be strategic. If we move too fast, they'll have time to cover their tracks. But if we wait too long, they could find out we have this evidence. I'll start building a case, but you need to be prepared. This won't be easy." Jack nodded, the weight of the challenge ahead pressing down on him. But for the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. Titan's loyalty, Claire's determination, and the mysterious drive had given him a fighting chance. The air in the courtroom was heavy with anticipation as Jack returned to his cell. His emotions oscillated between relief and anxiety. The evidence Claire had uncovered was a breakthrough, but it also brought new risks. The people who framed him were powerful, and exposing them would put him, Claire, and even Titan in danger. He had spent years behind bars, feeling powerless, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Back at her office, Claire dove deeper into the files from the USB drive. She meticulously catalogued every document, cross-referencing dates, emails, and financial transactions. The deeper she dug, the more connections she found, revealing a sprawling conspiracy that extended far beyond the non-profit. The board members who framed Jack were implicated in a web of corruption involving high-profile individuals and government contracts. It was clear, this was not a small operation, it was systemic. As the hours ticked by, Claire's phone buzzed with a text message from a blocked number. "Stop digging. This isn't your fight." Her heart skipped a beat. She glanced around her office, suddenly hyper-aware of her surroundings. Were they watching her? How did they know she was involved? Shaking off the fear, Claire took a deep breath. She knew this kind of intimidation came with the territory. If anything, it confirmed she was on the right track. Despite the warning, Claire decided to press forward. She called in a trusted IT specialist, Lucas Gee, to analyze the drive's encryption and verify its authenticity. If they were going to present this in court, every piece of evidence had to hold up under scrutiny. "This isn't just amateur-level encryption," Lucas remarked as he worked on the files. "Whoever did this was a pro. They wanted to protect this data at all costs." "Can we trace who created it?" Claire asked, leaning over his shoulder. Lucas shook his head. "No chance. They covered their tracks too well. But what I can tell you is that this data is solid. There's no doubt it was pulled directly from internal servers." Meanwhile, Jack's mind raced as he sat alone in his cell. Titan's role in delivering the USB drive replayed in his thoughts. The loyal dog had been his only constant throughout the turmoil, and now Titan had given him a fighting chance. But questions lingered. Who had orchestrated this? Why had they chosen him to carry the burden of exposing the truth? And, most importantly, how far would the conspirators go to silence him? The next morning, Claire visited Jack with updates. As they sat across from each other, she outlined the depth of the conspiracy. "This isn't just about you anymore," Claire began. "The people who framed you are part of something much bigger. They've been funneling money through shell companies, falsifying documents, and using non-profit funds for personal gain. If we bring this to light, we won't just clear your name, we'll be exposing a network of corruption." Jack leaned back in his chair, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. "So, what's the plan?" "I've started building the case," Claire said. "But we need to be careful. These people have resources and connections. They'll come after us if they feel threatened." "Then let's make sure they don't see it coming," Jack replied, determination hardening his voice. Claire nodded. "We'll need to move in phases. First, I'll secure the evidence with a third party. Then I'll reach out to an investigative journalist I trust. If something happens to us, the story will still get out." While Claire worked on securing the evidence, Jack began to notice subtle changes in the prison. Guards who had always ignored him were suddenly paying closer attention. Conversations in the yard seemed to halt whenever he approached. It was as if the news of his court request had drawn unwanted attention. One afternoon, a fellow inmate named Red, known for his sharp intuition, pulled Jack aside. "You've got eyes on you, Reynolds," Red warned, his voice low. "Word is, some people on the outside don't like the noise you're making. You'd better watch your back." Jack nodded, appreciating the warning but refusing to show fear. He had spent years enduring the daily grind of prison life. He wasn't about to crumble now. Meanwhile, Claire's efforts to contact her journalist friend, Sophie Nguyen, were met with resistance. Sophie was intrigued by the story, but wary of the risks. "If this is as big as you say, Claire, you're putting yourself in the crosshairs," Sophie cautioned during a phone call. "You need to be sure you can handle the fallout." "I don't have a choice," Claire replied. "Jack's life depends on this, and so do the lives of everyone else they've wronged." Sophie sighed. "Send me what you have. I'll take a look, but I'm not promising anything." Claire knew that convincing Sophie to run the story was only half the battle. They needed concrete proof, and while the USB drive provided plenty, she needed to tie the evidence directly to the conspirators. That meant finding a way to connect the files to specific actions and decisions made by the board members. As Claire and Sophie strategized, Jack received an unexpected visit from Titan's former trainer, a retired K-9 officer named Mike. The trainer's sudden appearance raised Jack's suspicions, but Mike's calm demeanor quickly put him at ease. "I heard about what Titan did," Mike said, sitting across from Jack in the visitors area. "That dog was always special, but I didn't think he'd ever be involved in something like this." "Why are you here?" Jack asked, cutting to the chase. "I came to tell you that Titan wasn't acting on instinct. Someone trained him for this. Someone who knew exactly how to get him to you." Jack's heart raced. "Do you know who?" Mike shook his head. "Not yet, but I have a feeling we're going to find out soon." Claire's initial relief over the progress they had made was short-lived. The deeper she and Sophie delved into the evidence, the more intricate the web of corruption appeared. The non-profit wasn't just a front for financial fraud, it was tied to larger, more dangerous entities with far-reaching influence. What initially seemed like embezzlement turned into something far more sinister. Claire's investigative trail led her to a series of anonymous offshore accounts. Transactions linked back to companies that didn't officially exist, shell corporations masking illicit operations. The money trail suggested ties to organized crime, and possibly even government contractors, who were using the non-profit as a laundering mechanism. Late one evening, Claire sat in her dimly lit apartment, poring over financial documents. She received an unexpected call from Sophie. "I found something," Sophie said, her voice urgent. "The names on these documents, one of them belongs to a federal contractor. They supply surveillance equipment to the government. If we connect this to them, we're not just dealing with corporate fraud. We're looking at classified operations." "Classified?" Claire's stomach tightened. "How classified are we talking?" "Enough to make people disappear if we're not careful," Sophie replied grimly. Meanwhile, in prison, Jack felt the increasing weight of his situation. Red's warnings lingered in his mind, and the heightened scrutiny from the guards was impossible to ignore. During a routine inspection, one of the guards made a veiled comment that sent chills down Jack's spine. "Be careful, Reynolds. Some fights are bigger than you," the guard muttered, barely audible. Jack knew better than to react, but the message was clear. His pursuit of justice was ruffling feathers in dangerous places. That night, Jack was jolted awake by shouting in the cell block. A fire had broken out in the far wing, forcing the guards to evacuate several inmates. The timing felt too coincidental. As Jack watched the chaos unfold, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was sending a message, not just to him, but to anyone aligned with his cause. Outside the prison, Claire's situation was becoming increasingly precarious. She noticed unfamiliar cars parked near her home and a growing number of coincidences. Emails mysteriously disappearing, files being corrupted, and her phone line intermittently cutting out. Someone was clearly trying to sabotage her efforts. Refusing to back down, Claire turned to Lucas for help. "I need a secure way to keep these files," she said, handing him a hard drive containing the most critical evidence, "something they can't touch, no matter what." Lucas nodded, his expression serious. "I'll set up redundancies and encryptions. They'll need a small army to crack this." As Lucas worked, Claire decided to take a calculated risk. She reached out to an anonymous whistleblower forum, posting a cryptic message about her findings. She hoped it would attract allies who could provide additional protection, or at least draw public attention to their investigation. While Claire struggled with external threats, Sophie unearthed another critical piece of the puzzle. She discovered a link between the non-profit's board members and a shadowy figure known only as Lazarus. Lazarus was a notorious fixer, someone who specialized in burying scandals and neutralizing whistleblowers. The mention of his name in the documents confirmed the scale of what they were up against. Sophie immediately called Claire. "We've got a problem," she said. "Lazarus is involved." Claire's blood ran cold. "Are you sure?" "Positive. His name appears in encrypted communications tied to the non-profit's offshore accounts. If he's in this, we're not just fighting a corrupt board. We're fighting someone who's made a career out of silencing people like us." Back in prison, Jack received an envelope during mail call. Inside was a photograph of Titan, accompanied by a chilling note. "Don't let your dog become collateral damage." The note sent Jack into a silent fury. Whoever sent it had crossed a line. Titan had already been through enough, and the idea of anyone using him as leverage was unbearable. Jack folded the note and tucked it into his pocket, vowing not to let his fear show. When Claire visited him later that day, Jack showed her the note. She read it, her face pale but resolute. "They're trying to intimidate us," she said, her voice firm. "But it won't work. We're too close to the truth." Despite the mounting pressure, Claire and Sophie continued to piece together the evidence. With Lucas's help, they decrypted a set of files that revealed a timeline of events leading to Jack's arrest. The timeline exposed how the non-profit's board members had manipulated public records, falsified audits, and fabricated witness testimonies. It was damning proof, but it still lacked one critical element: a direct connection to the people behind the scenes. Desperate for answers, Claire revisited the possibility of involving Mike, Titan's former trainer. She called him, hoping he could provide insight into how Titan ended up at the courthouse with the USB drive. When Mike arrived at her office, he brought with him a stack of old training logs and a wealth of knowledge about Titan's abilities. "Whoever orchestrated this knew what they were doing," Mike said, flipping through the logs. "Titan was trained for specific scenarios, delivering messages, navigating complex environments. This wasn't a coincidence." "Do you think you can trace who might have retrained him?" Claire asked. Mike nodded slowly. "It'll take time, but I've got a few ideas." As the stakes continued to rise, Claire and Jack found themselves drawing strength from unexpected sources. Jack's resilience and Titan's unwavering loyalty became symbols of hope for Claire, while Claire's determination to fight for justice reignited Jack's sense of purpose. Together, they resolved to push forward, no matter the cost. Claire sat in her office late at night, staring at the scattered documents and evidence that painted a chilling picture of corruption. The air was heavy with unspoken fears, but amidst the chaos, Titan rested at her feet, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to her growing anxiety. Despite everything, the dog remained a source of quiet reassurance, a reminder of why they were fighting. The phone rang, cutting through the silence. It was Sophie. "I just got off the line with a contact at the whistleblower forum," she began, her voice taut with urgency. "They've confirmed something big. Lazarus has been mobilized." Claire leaned forward. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they're aware of us, Claire. Lazarus doesn't get involved unless someone's rattled the wrong cages. We're not just investigating anymore. We're targets." The words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. For a moment, Claire considered pulling back, not for her sake, but for Jack's and Titan's. Yet, deep down, she knew retreat wasn't an option. Meanwhile, Jack sat alone in his cell, the photograph of Titan clutched tightly in his hand. The note he had received earlier replayed in his mind like a haunting refrain. The thought of Titan being used as leverage gnawed at him, filling him with both anger and dread. Red's words echoed in his memory. "You've got more fight in you than you realize." When the prison chaplain visited later that evening, Jack hesitated before speaking. "Do you believe some fights are bigger than us?" he asked, his voice low. The chaplain, an older man with kind eyes, nodded. "Of course, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. Sometimes, the biggest fights require the smallest acts of courage." Jack absorbed the words, finding a flicker of clarity amidst his inner turmoil. He realized that his fight wasn't just for himself. It was for Titan, for Claire, and for the truth. The next day, Claire met Sophie in person for the first time since the investigation began. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, their voices hushed as they discussed their next steps. Sophie brought a new piece of evidence, a series of coded emails that tied the non-profit directly to government contracts. The implications were staggering. "This could blow the lid off everything," Sophie said, sliding the printed emails across the table. "But if we use it, we'll paint a target so big on our backs that there'll be no going back." Claire studied the documents, her mind racing. "If we don't use it, Jack remains in prison and the people behind this get away with it." Sophie sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I know, but we need to be strategic. One wrong move, and they'll bury us before we can do anything." Back at the prison, Jack was escorted to the visitation room for an unexpected meeting. Claire had managed to arrange a brief visit, knowing that seeing Titan would be impossible for now. Instead, she brought news. "I've got evidence," Claire began, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Real evidence that ties this whole thing together. But it's risky, Jack. If we push too hard, they'll come after us." Jack looked at her, his expression resolute. "Do it. Whatever it takes, Claire. Don't let them win." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "I won't, but you need to promise me something too. Stay strong. No matter what happens, we'll get through this." Jack gave her a faint smile. "I've got Titan waiting for me on the other side. That's all the strength I need." Later that evening, Sophie discovered a vulnerability in the system they were investigating. One of the shell companies tied to the non-profit had been carelessly managed, leaving traces of its connections to high-profile individuals. The discovery was a breakthrough, but it also posed a dilemma. Exposing this connection could accelerate the investigation, but it would also escalate the risks tenfold. Claire called Lucas to discuss their options. "If we use this, we'll force their hand," she said. "But it might also force us into hiding." Lucas was silent for a moment before responding. "Sometimes, the only way to win is to take the biggest risk. Just make sure you're ready for what comes next." As tensions mounted, Titan began exhibiting unusual behavior. During one of their late-night sessions, he repeatedly nudged Claire's arm, directing her attention to a file she had overlooked. Inside the file was a handwritten note, Jack's original plea for help when he first realized he was being framed. It contained details that aligned with the emails Sophie had uncovered, creating a clearer picture of the conspiracy. Claire stared at the note, her mind racing. Titan's instincts had once again led her to a critical piece of the puzzle. "Good boy," she whispered, stroking his fur. "We're going to figure this out." Despite the mounting evidence, doubt began to creep into Claire's thoughts. She confided in Sophie during a late-night call. "What if we're wrong? What if this doesn't lead anywhere?" Sophie's response was firm. "Claire, we've come too far to stop now. Jack is counting on us. Titan is counting on us. And deep down, you know the truth. You've always known." Claire took a deep breath, letting Sophie's words settle. She realized that, despite the risks, they were on the right path. The fight wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about justice, for Jack, for Titan, and for everyone else who had been wronged. Claire woke up to the sharp ring of her phone. It was Sophie, her voice trembling on the other end. "Claire, they know Lazarus has made its move." The words sent a chill down Claire's spine. "What do you mean?" "I just received a message," Sophie explained. "It was cryptic, but clear. You're too close. Back off. And that's not all. My laptop was tampered with last night. Files are missing." Claire clenched her fist. The threat was unmistakable, but it only fueled her determination. "We're not backing off. Not now." At the prison, Jack felt the weight of the unseen battle Claire and Sophie were fighting. Guard Reynolds passed him a note during his routine check. "They're watching me now too. Stay strong." Jack understood the implications. The network of people supporting him was shrinking under the increasing scrutiny of Lazarus. Every action, every piece of evidence Claire uncovered was forcing their enemies to act. That same morning, Claire received an unmarked package at her office. Inside was a single USB drive and a note. "For Titan." She stared at the note, her mind racing. Who had sent it, and why mention Titan? Against her better judgment, Claire plugged the drive into an isolated system. What she found was both shocking and illuminating. Surveillance footage of Jack and Titan from years prior. During the time Jack had worked for the non-profit, the footage showed interactions between Jack and several board members who were later tied to Lazarus. One video in particular stood out. Jack and Titan at a board meeting, where Titan's training as a search and rescue dog was being discussed. The board members seemed overly interested in the dog's abilities. Claire replayed the video, noticing a subtle exchange of glances among them. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. Titan had been targeted from the start, not just as Jack's companion, but as a tool they intended to use. Claire and Sophie met later that day to discuss their findings. "This changes everything," Sophie said, pacing the room. "Titan wasn't just collateral damage, he's a key piece in their operation." "But why?" Claire asked. "What could they possibly want with a dog?" Sophie hesitated. "Think about it, Claire. Titan was trained to detect anomalies, track scents, and navigate complex terrains. What if Lazarus wasn't just interested in Jack's work, but in Titan's abilities? They could use him for anything, covert operations, smuggling information, or even as a courier. The implications were staggering. Titan wasn't just a loyal companion, he was a weapon Lazarus wanted to control. Meanwhile, Jack received another visitor at the prison. It was Red, his cellmate from before. But this time, Red's demeanor was different, more calculated. "I've been hearing things, Jack," he began. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest." Jack didn't respond immediately. "What do you want, Red?" "To warn you," Red replied. "Lazarus doesn't lose. If they think you're a threat, they'll crush you, and your friends, they're just as vulnerable." Jack's jaw tightened. "Then why tell me this?" Red smirked. "Because sometimes, even the bad guys hate the bigger bad guys." The cryptic statement left Jack uneasy. Could Red be trusted, or was this another move by Lazarus to sow doubt? Claire and Sophie decided to reach out to their trusted contact in cybersecurity, Paul Etis, for help analyzing the USB drive. Paul Etis, a former hacker turned ethical consultant, had connections that could dig deeper into Lazarus's operations. "This isn't just a random drive," Paul said after a few hours. "The metadata on these files shows they were accessed from a high-security server last week. Whoever sent this to you had inside access to Lazarus." "Do you think it's a trap?" Claire asked. Paul nodded. "It's possible, but it's also a breadcrumb. Someone on the inside might be trying to help you." The tension escalated further when Claire received an encrypted email from an unknown sender. The message contained detailed plans for an upcoming Lazarus operation, one involving Titan. The plans indicated that Lazarus intended to use Titan in a covert mission, leveraging his abilities for their benefit. "This is insane," Sophie said, reading over Claire's shoulder. "They're not just framing Jack, they're weaponizing Titan." Claire's blood boiled. "They can't get away with this. We need to stop them." Late that night, Claire sat with Titan by her side, scrolling through the evidence they had gathered. Titan rested his head on her lap, his calm presence grounding her amidst the storm. She looked into his eyes and felt a surge of resolve. Titan had been loyal, brave, and unyielding. Now it was her turn to protect him. The phone buzzed. It was Lucas. "We've got a lead," he said. "A warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's tied to Lazarus and matches the location mentioned in the plans." "Then that's where we go next," Claire replied, her voice steady. The next day, Claire, Sophie, and Lucas prepared to investigate the warehouse. They knew it was a risk, but they also knew it might be their only chance to uncover the truth. Titan, ever vigilant, would accompany them. Before leaving, Claire sent Jack a message through a trusted channel. "We're close, Jack. Hold on. Titan and I won't let them win." In his cell, Jack read the message, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time in months, he felt hope. The abandoned warehouse loomed on the outskirts of the city, its rusted exterior a stark reminder of the secrets it concealed. Claire, Sophie, Lucas, and Titan approached cautiously, keeping to the shadows. The plan was simple: infiltrate, document, and leave undetected. Yet the weight of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Titan, alert as ever, took the lead. His sharp instincts guided them through the overgrown lot surrounding the warehouse. He stopped abruptly near the side entrance, sniffing intently. "What is it, boy?" Claire whispered. Titan let out a low growl. His eyes locked on the door. "It's probably guarded," Lucas murmured, drawing closer. "But we can't turn back now." Inside, the air was thick with the hum of machinery. Rows of computer servers blinked in the dim light, their presence confirming the warehouse's role as a Lazarus facility. Sophie quickly set up a portable scanner to retrieve data from the network. "Make it fast," Claire urged, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. "Give me 5 minutes," Sophie replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Titan suddenly tensed, his ears twitching toward a distant noise. A faint shuffle echoed through the cavernous space. Claire motioned for Lucas to investigate, while she and Titan stayed behind to guard Sophie. As Lucas moved deeper into the warehouse, he discovered an adjoining room filled with crates marked with Lazarus insignias. Opening one cautiously, he found an array of electronic devices, from surveillance equipment to encrypted communication tools. "For they're running an entire operation out of here," he muttered, snapping photos for evidence. Back at the main server, Sophie's face lit up. "I've got something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These files detail their upcoming plans. Look, there's a schedule for Titan." Claire leaned in, her stomach tightening as she read the document. The schedule listed times, locations, and tasks, all involving Titan being transported between facilities. "They're planning to use him tomorrow," she said, her voice trembling. "We're running out of time." Titan growled again, this time louder, pulling Claire's attention to the doorway. Footsteps were approaching, several pairs. "Sophie, we need to move," Claire said urgently. "Almost done," Sophie replied, her focus unbroken. The footsteps drew closer, accompanied by muffled voices. Lucas reappeared, his face grim. "We've got company," he said. "Security patrol, and they're heading this way." "Time's up," Claire said, grabbing Sophie's arm. "We have to go now." The group moved swiftly, but the exit was no longer clear. Guards had entered the warehouse, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Titan took the lead, guiding the group through an alternate path toward the rear exit. His training proved invaluable, as he alerted them to hidden cameras and avoided detection. "Titan is incredible," Lucas whispered, watching the dog navigate the treacherous terrain. Claire gave a small nod, her heart swelling with pride. Titan wasn't just leading them to safety, he was their hope, their guardian. As they reached the exit, a sudden shout echoed through the warehouse. "Stop right there!" The guards had spotted them. Claire and Lucas froze, shielding Sophie as she clutched the data drive. Titan growled protectively, positioning himself between the group and the approaching guards. "We're out of options," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the tension. "No," Claire replied, her eyes on Titan. "We're not—" With a sharp command from Claire, Titan sprang into action. He darted toward the guards, his movements precise and calculated. The distraction was enough to create an opening. "Go!" Claire shouted, pulling Sophie and Lucas toward the exit. Titan returned moments later, his tail wagging despite the tension. The guards were disoriented but unharmed, giving the group just enough time to escape into the night. Back at their safe house, Sophie plugged the drive into a secure laptop. "This is big," she said, her eyes scanning the files. "These plans aren't just about Titan. Lazarus has operations spanning multiple cities. They're using animals like Titan in their schemes. Dogs, falcons, even dolphins. Claire's breath caught. They're exploiting them for profit and power, she said, her voice filled with disgust. Titan isn't just a pawn in their game. He's part of something much larger. As they processed the information, Claire received a call from Guard Reynolds. "Jack's in danger," he said, his tone urgent. "They're moving him to a high-security wing tomorrow. I don't know if I can reach him after that." Claire's mind raced. The timeline was closing in. Titan was scheduled to be taken, Jack was being isolated, and their evidence was still incomplete. "We need to act fast," she said, turning to Sophie and Lucas. "If we don't stop Lazarus now, we might never get another chance." Titan rested beside Claire, his eyes scanning the room. She placed a hand on his head, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "We're going to get through this," she whispered. "You, me, and Jack. Together." The team spent the rest of the night devising a plan. They would strike at the heart of Lazarus's operations, using the evidence they had gathered to expose the organization. But first, they had to protect Titan and Jack. The stakes had never been higher. The morning air was heavy with anticipation, as Claire, Sophie, and Lucas prepared to execute their plan. Every detail had been considered, every potential risk accounted for, or so they hoped. Titan, ever vigilant, seemed to sense the tension, staying close to Claire as they reviewed their strategy one final time. Their objective was clear: intercept the transport scheduled to take Titan to a Lazarus facility. Simultaneously, they would use the evidence Sophie uncovered to disrupt Lazarus's broader operations and secure Jack's release from the high-security wing. It was a dual-pronged mission that required flawless timing. The first phase began with Sophie infiltrating Lazarus's internal systems from a remote location. "I'm in," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm setting up the signal interference. This should delay their communication long enough for us to move." Claire and Lucas, stationed near the transport route, waited in tense silence. Titan sat by Claire's side, his ears perked. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the stillness. "They're here," Lucas whispered, his hand tightening around the binoculars. Two black SUVs flanked a van in the center, all bearing Lazarus's logo. Claire took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "Remember, Titan is our priority," she said, her voice firm. Lucas nodded, positioning himself to intercept the convoy. As the vehicles approached the designated point, Lucas activated a makeshift roadblock, a fallen tree and debris strategically placed to force the convoy to stop. The guards exited cautiously, scanning the area for threats. "This is it," Claire murmured, signaling Titan. The dog bolted into action, darting toward the van with precision. His training allowed him to evade the guards and reach the back of the vehicle undetected. Inside, Titan found himself face to face with another guard. The man froze, clearly unprepared for the sudden appearance of the German shepherd. Titan let out a low growl, his presence alone enough to intimidate the guard into retreating. With the path clear, Titan began pawing at the van's door handle, a signal Claire had taught him. Outside, Lucas created a diversion, drawing the guard's attention away from the van. Claire seized the opportunity to approach, her movements swift and silent. She opened the van's doors, finding a heavily sedated Titan look-alike inside. A decoy meant to mislead anyone tracking the real Titan. "They're trying to cover their tracks," Claire muttered, her anger boiling. She quickly freed the dog and replaced it with a device Sophie had prepared, one that would track the van's movements and transmit their conversations back to the team. Meanwhile, Sophie faced her own challenge. Lazarus had detected her intrusion into their system and was attempting to shut her out. "I need more time," she said, her voice strained as she worked to maintain control. Every second counted, as her interference was the only thing preventing Lazarus from calling reinforcements to the convoy. "Hold on, Sophie," Lucas said over the radio. "We're almost clear." Titan returned to Claire's side, his tail wagging as if the mission was routine. Claire gave him a quick pat before they retreated into the woods, regrouping with Lucas. The convoy, unaware of the swap, resumed its journey. The team had succeeded in retrieving the decoy, but the danger was far from over. "This changes everything," Claire said as they reviewed the files Sophie had downloaded earlier. "If Lazarus is using decoys, they're hiding something much bigger. We need to figure out where the real Titan is supposed to go." Sophie, still connected to Lazarus's network, pieced together fragments of data. There's a secondary facility, hidden, unregistered. It's where they're taking him, she said, her face pale. And it's where Jack is being held. The revelation sent a chill through the group. The secondary facility was heavily fortified, making it nearly impossible to breach without drawing attention. If we don't act now, we'll lose them both, Claire said, determination hardening her features. Lucas nodded. We've come this far. Let's finish it. Sophie worked quickly to disable the facility's surveillance systems, creating a narrow window of opportunity. You'll only have about 15 minutes, yeah, she warned. After that, they'll know you're there. As they approached the facility, the tension was palpable. The sprawling compound was surrounded by high fences and patrolled by armed guards. Titan, sensing the gravity of the situation, stayed close to Claire, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Lucas took the lead, using the distraction Sophie created to disable the gate's electronic lock. The group slipped inside, moving quickly but carefully. Titan's training once again proved invaluable, as he alerted them to hidden cameras and guided them along the safest path. Inside, the facility was a labyrinth of corridors and secured rooms. Claire's heart pounded as they searched for Jack, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Titan led them to a heavily guarded door. His behavior confirmed what they already suspected. Jack was inside. Lucas prepared a makeshift smoke device to disorient the guards. We only get one shot at this, he said, handing Claire a spare weapon. Stay behind me. The plan unfolded with military precision. The guards were caught off guard by the smoke, giving Claire and Lucas enough time to breach the door. Inside, they found Jack, restrained but alive. His face lit up at the sight of Claire and Titan. Let's get out of here, Claire said, her voice firm. Jack nodded, too weak to speak but clearly relieved. Lucas and Claire helped him to his feet, while Titan stood guard. The group navigated back through the facility, their escape complicated by the sound of alarms blaring in the distance. They know we're here, Lucas said. We need to move. Titan took the lead, his instincts guiding them toward an alternate exit. Despite the chaos, the team managed to slip out just as reinforcements arrived, disappearing into the dense forest surrounding the facility. The adrenaline of the escape had barely subsided as Claire, Lucas, Sophie, and Titan regrouped in a hidden safe house deep within the forest. Jack, weak but alive, leaned against a makeshift cot, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, he said, his eyes locking with Claire's. I thought I'd never get out. While Sophie worked to patch Jack's wounds and Lucas fortified the area, Claire turned her focus to the next challenge. The files Sophie had uncovered earlier revealed the facility's larger purpose. A sprawling network of hidden operations orchestrated by Lazarus. The dog decoy they'd rescued was just one piece of a broader, sinister puzzle. This isn't just about Titan or Jack, Sophie said, her tone heavy. Lazarus is using animals like Titan as carriers for encrypted data, passing information between black market buyers and government contractors. They've created a system that's nearly untraceable until now. Claire stared at the screen, anger and determination brewing within her. If we can expose this, we can stop them for good. But we need more than what we have now. Sophie nodded. The files we retrieved are enough to open an investigation, but not enough to bring them down. We need the master key, the encryption algorithm stored in their central servers. Lucas, standing near the window, spoke up. Going back to their main facility is suicide. They'll be on high alert after tonight. Claire agreed but remained resolute. We don't have a choice. If we stop now, Lazarus will cover their tracks, and this whole operation will have been for nothing. Jack, his voice raspy, added, They won't expect you to strike again so soon. That's your only advantage. The plan was set in motion. Sophie would remotely guide Claire, Lucas, and Titan into Lazarus's central facility, while Jack remained behind to recover. It was a high-risk, high-reward operation, with no room for error. As the team prepared, Claire knelt beside Titan, stroking his fur. You've already done so much, buddy, she said softly. But I need you one more time. Can you do this? Titan let out a low, reassuring bark, his loyalty unwavering. The facility was a fortress of advanced technology and tight security. Armed guards patrolled every corridor, and surveillance drones hovered overhead. Sophie's interference bought them precious seconds to maneuver past checkpoints, but the margin for error was razor-thin. Claire, There's a maintenance shaft 20 meters to your left. Sophie's voice crackled through their earpieces. It's unguarded, but the cameras will come back online in 45 seconds. Claire and Lucas moved swiftly, Titan following close behind. The shaft led to the heart of the facility, a sprawling data center housing Lazarus's encrypted files. As they reached the data center, Sophie guided them to the server room. The encryption key is stored on a physical device, she explained. It's likely in a secure compartment near the mainframe. Look for a red access panel. Titan's keen senses led them to the panel, his nose pressed against it as he barked softly. Claire quickly dismantled the panel, revealing a sleek, glowing device embedded within. "Got it," she whispered. But as she pulled the device free, an alarm blared through the facility. "They know you're there," Sophie said urgently. "You need to move, now." Guards began swarming the area, their radios crackling with orders. Lucas tossed a smoke grenade to create cover, but their escape route was rapidly closing. Titan, sensing the danger, took point, leading them through a labyrinth of corridors. The team reached an emergency exit, but it was barricaded. "We don't have time to go back," Lucas said, his voice tense. "We need another way out." Claire spotted an air vent overhead. "Titan can fit through there," she said. "He can carry the device and get it to Sophie." Lucas hesitated. "What about us?" Claire's jaw tightened. "We'll hold them off." Titan seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Claire attached the device to his harness and gave him a final command. "Go, Titan. Find Sophie." The German shepherd hesitated for only a moment before leaping into the vent and disappearing into the darkness. The guards closed in, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. Claire and Lucas prepared to make their stand, using the last of their smoke grenades and a barricade to buy Titan time. "We've faced worse odds," Lucas said, forcing a smile. Claire couldn't help but smirk. "You're always the optimist." The firefight that followed was chaotic and intense. Claire and Lucas managed to hold their ground, but it was clear they couldn't last much longer. Just as their ammunition dwindled, Sophie's voice broke through the static. "Titan made it," she said. "I've got the device. I'm decrypting the files now." Relief flooded through Claire, but it was short-lived. The guards were regrouping, and their reinforcements were closing in. Claire glanced at Lucas, both of them silently acknowledging the likelihood of capture. "We did what we came to do," Claire said. "That's what matters." Lucas nodded. "Let's give them hell." As the guards stormed the room, Claire and Lucas braced for the inevitable. Their mission accomplished, but their fate uncertain. The tense silence of the courtroom was shattered as the prosecution prepared its final statements against Claire and Lucas, who now stood accused of trespassing and espionage. Their actions at Lazarus's facility had cost the company millions and disrupted operations, but Claire and Lucas remained defiant, their resolve unshaken. Unbeknownst to Lazarus or the court, Sophie had been working tirelessly behind the scenes. The data decrypted from the device Titan carried had revealed far more than they anticipated. Lazarus's network of encrypted information not only implicated them in corporate espionage and data manipulation, but also exposed a sprawling conspiracy involving high-ranking officials and major corporations. Sophie worked day and night, carefully piecing together the evidence into a comprehensive report. Titan, ever loyal, stayed by her side as if sensing the gravity of their task. The day of the trial had arrived. Sophie, armed with undeniable proof of Lazarus's corruption, entered the courtroom flanked by Jack, who had recovered enough to walk with determination. She carried a file thick with documents and a USB drive containing every encrypted secret Lazarus had tried to hide. Titan trotted beside her, his presence a symbol of loyalty and truth. His appearance in the courtroom caused a murmur among the spectators. "Isn't that the dog?" someone whispered. Claire and Lucas, seated at the defense table, exchanged a glance filled with hope. The judge, a stern figure who had little patience for theatrics, called the room to order. The prosecutor began with their usual rhetoric, painting Claire and Lucas as reckless vigilantes who endangered lives. But before they could proceed further, Sophie stood and addressed the court. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady and resolute, "what my colleagues did was not only justified, but necessary. The evidence I hold proves that Lazarus has been engaging in illegal activities on an unprecedented scale." She presented the decrypted files, walking the court through Lazarus's operations. Every piece of fabricated evidence, every manipulated document, and every underhanded deal was laid bare. The room fell into stunned silence as Sophie showed how Lazarus had exploited animals like Titan to carry encrypted data, masking their operations. Claire and Lucas watched, their hope rekindled as Sophie skillfully dismantled the prosecution's case. Even the judge, initially skeptical, leaned forward with interest, flipping through the documents Sophie provided. The turning point came when Sophie played a recording extracted from Lazarus's own encrypted files. It was a conversation between two high-ranking executives, openly discussing their schemes and the measures they'd take to silence any dissenters. "This is irrefutable proof," Sophie said. "Not only were my clients justified in their actions, but they also uncovered a conspiracy that endangered countless lives." The judge called for a recess, retreating to their chambers to review the evidence. During the break, Titan became the center of attention, his gentle demeanor disarming even the most hardened skeptics in the room. Claire knelt beside him, whispering, "You've done it, boy. You've shown them the truth." When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. The judge delivered their verdict with gravitas. "Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that the actions of the defendants were not criminal, but heroic. This court finds Claire and Lucas not guilty." The courtroom erupted in applause, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I am ordering a federal investigation into Lazarus and its operations. This level of corruption cannot go unchecked." Claire and Lucas embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. Sophie stood nearby, her usually calm demeanor breaking into a triumphant smile. Jack, though weak, joined them, placing a supportive hand on Claire's shoulder. "You did it," he said. "We all did." Titan, sensing the collective joy, let out a triumphant bark. The courtroom burst into laughter, the tension melting away in a moment of shared humanity. Even the judge couldn't suppress a smile, saying, "It seems we owe a debt of gratitude to this remarkable dog." Outside the courthouse, the team was greeted by a throng of supporters, reporters, and animal advocates, inspired by Titan's role in exposing the truth. Claire knelt beside him once more, placing her hands on either side of his face. "You're more than a hero, Titan," she said. "You're family." As the investigation into Lazarus unfolded, the company's entire network of corruption was dismantled. High-ranking executives were arrested, and the facility that had once held Jack was shut down permanently. The story of Claire, Lucas, Sophie, and Titan became a symbol of courage, justice, and the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. In the months that followed, the team established a foundation dedicated to exposing corruption and advocating for animal welfare. Titan became its mascot, his story inspiring others to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. As the sun set on the steps of the courthouse, the world had witnessed the power of loyalty, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Titan's story, intertwined with the relentless pursuit of justice by Claire, Lucas, Sophie, and Jack, stood as a testament to the extraordinary courage it takes to stand against corruption. If this tale moved you, imagine the countless untold stories waiting to be uncovered. By subscribing to our channel, you join a community dedicated to exploring the incredible connections between humans and the animals who shape our lives in unimaginable ways. What part of this story resonated with you the most? Drop a comment below and join the discussion. Share this video with friends, family, and anyone who believes in the power of truth and the magic of animals. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story that will touch your heart and ignite your spirit. Together, let's celebrate the heroes, both human and animal, who remind us of the strength found in compassion and the relentless pursuit of justice. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story that will leave you inspired.